But others were wonderfully busy, preparing engines of war, to cast them at the corners and batter down the towers, and many costly works of defence they brought down to the ground. By then the craftsmen had built a wonderfully strong barrier all around the city, with many bastions, so that no man could find a way through the siege without fresh harm, no matter what he attempted. And then they filled the ditch with the dead corpses, and packed the corners beneath with rotting flesh, so that the stench and foul smell might strike over the walls to poison the faithless people and bring about their death. The course of the water channel that came into the town they blocked on every side wherever there was a spring, with stakes and stones and stinking bodies, so that they could obtain no water within the town. Vespasian returned to his tent, and Titus went with him, and he commanded his council to decide upon Caphius, what death should be his judgment, together with all the great scholars whom they had captured. Judges upon the dais quickly gave their sentence. Each man should be flayed, the skin taken clean away. But first they should be placed in tents, drawn there by ropes, and then immediately hung high upon gallows, their feet towards the sky, so that people might behold them, with honey spread all around and the body anointed. And dogs and cats with very sharp claws were bound and tied around Caphius, and 2 apes also, to torment him further, to tear his raw flesh on every side. And thus was the accursed wretch punished, throughout the long summer day, from morn until evening. The learned men of the law, a little apart, were also hung upside down, I believe, with dogs and cats likewise bound to them, so that all men might see the sorrow they suffered. Many people in the city fell over the walls from grief. 70 killed themselves because of the sorrow of that sight. They seized themselves by the hair and pulled it fiercely, and some from sorrow dashed themselves down to the ground. The king commanded that they be taken down when they were dead, and a great fire was made quickly by the gallows, and Caiaphas and his scholars were thrown into it, so that every bone was burned completely into small ashes. Then they went to the walls on the windward side, and scattered the powder broadly over the city. "Here is dust for your drink," one of them said to them. "Drink it all around for the bishop's soul." Thus ended Caiaphas and his 12 scholars, as a sign of the treachery and betrayal that they had committed when Christ in their council was condemned to death. And so by that time the day was brought to its end. The king and his council spoke together, and chose out captains, strong and warlike men, to keep watch throughout the night. Then he took his rest as reason required. Vespasian in his lodging slept little, but turned and walked about, and often in great sorrow thought upon the city, wondering how he might win it by any means. When shadow and bright day parted from each other, larks above lifted up their voices, young men rose from bed and went into the field, sounding trumpets and clarions and making great noise. Vespasian prepared himself quickly out of bed. From foot to head he armed himself then in fine golden garments, with a breastplate, with a great coat of grey steel, sharpened very keenly. And then he put on a coat bearing the colours of his arms, which were rich and dreadful to behold. Then he girded himself with a belt full of precious stones, with diamonds and jewels richly adorned. A bright burnished sword he placed at his side, with the pommel and hilt of pure polished gold. A broad shining shield hung upon his shoulder, completely covered in steel, made strong for the occasion. His plate gloves were edged with gold. Then he hurried quickly and asked for his horse, and lightly leapt upon it as a knight should. With visor and face covering prepared for the purpose, a crown entirely of pure gold was fastened above, set upon his helmet full of rich stones, fixed with precious pearls proudly adorned, and set all around the sides with sapphires. Then he spurred forward firmly upon his steed, as lightly as a lion let loose from a chain. His lords all saw him, and each said to the other, "This is a noble king to lead knights." He rode to the barriers where he intended to stop, and struck upon them with his sword, and said to the faithless, "Come forth, captives, you who slew Christ, and acknowledge him as your king before you suffer more. You cannot obtain food, however much you desire it, and you are also without water. How will you live? For not one drop will you gain during the days of your life. For I have destroyed all the streams that run into the town. The barriers that I have set up you shall never pass. It is so long and so broad, and has enclosed the town, with 20,000 to defend it, and holds off 600. It would be wiser to cry for mercy than to die without food, like beasts as you are." No one spoke a word, but waited for his moment, wondering how he might secretly kill someone with stones. Then, angry as the wind, Vespasian said, "If you wish to die like dogs, then let the devil have that one. For if I live and I may, gladly shall I make you speak more quickly before I hear your speech again." By then Joseph the Judean, who was always noble, had performed a wonderful trick when they lacked water. He made garments of wool and let them lie in the rain, washing them with water as they were, and hung them upon the walls. The garments dripped down and quickly began to dry. Steam rose from them, and the Romans watched. They believed in their minds that the city had no shortage, but rather a great abundance of water, every one of them. But Vespasian, who knew the ways of war, laughed loudly at it, and said to his lords, "Let no one be afraid, though they make such a boast. It is only a trick of war, because they lack water." Then new work immediately began. He attacked the city fiercely on every side, and broke it down with engines, sparing no place that masons and many men had worked on for many years. Joseph was aware of it, for he knew much about warfare, and filled sacks full of chaff and hung them upon the walls, against the force of the great blows where the stones struck, so that it harmed nothing at all, but only made a great noise. The Romans ran forward at once, and fastened to poles sharp sickles, and cut the ropes. They pulled away the sacks and the ropes, and tore them apart, so that everything crashed down and fell into the ditch. Then the noble Joseph saw these devices, and he ordered hot boiling oil to be thrown upon them. Vespasian then was wounded badly, through the middle of his heel by a very sharp dart, so that his boot and his heel were nailed together, and he was also fastened firmly to his horse's side. Then many worthy knights quickly became busy to avenge that wound, or else suffer grief. They rushed to the barriers and fought earnestly. Fiercely they fought, and thrust with spears, and drove the Judeans through into the hard walls. So angry were they then, because their king was hurt. A woman with child was struck upon her womb with a stone at that moment, as the story tells, so that the child came out completely from the body. Carried up like a ball over the town walls, children were crushed while playing in the streets. Women lay wide open beneath the stones, with children in their wombs smashed to the ground. It was a great sorrow to see in many different places. The city would have been taken at that assault if the people had not been so fierce, those who served the devil, who killed the Christians and guarded the walls with arrows and crossbows and many kinds of missiles. Spears from springalds shot out fiercely, darts driven downward made deep wounds, so that many from Rome by the setting of the sun would much rather have had a physician than any other entertainment. Vespasian stopped then and gathered his people who were beaten and bleeding beneath bright iron, and returned to his tents with the trouble they had suffered. Greatly weary from war and badly wounded, helmets and hauberks they quickly removed. Then physicians by torchlight examined their injuries, washed their wounds with wine and stopped them with wool. Then with oil and prayers they prepared remedies. Then each man went to supper. Though their wounds were sore, there was no one who complained, but they danced and sang with the sound of pipes, and with the noise of drums throughout all the night. Vespasian asked his lords all around that each man should reveal his thoughts about the war. For before this town was taken with all its high towers, he said that we must endure much shame and suffering. Then he turned to Titus and granted him the task of speaking about the city and the siege for them all. Then Titus answered wisely, I believe it is good to act with counsel when dealing with wicked men, for they are fierce in defense, proud men and bold. And this towered city is grievous to conquer. The smallest boy among them may lie upon the walls and strike them down with a stone, and many men are struck down. When we shall wait and watch and do little harm, the suffering will remain upon ourselves forever. Now the enemy can no longer go further to seek food. But would you stop your struggle while they spend what they have? We shall seize them with hunger and drive them out of the town, without wound or any injury through lack of food. For where food fails, there the heart grows weak, and where hunger is fierce, strength becomes feeble. Everyone agreed with him who belonged to the siege. The king was pleased with his words, and all his princes too. And he ordered constables and keepers of the people to be called, marshals and masons, in case anything might happen. With watchers and with intervals they kept guard over the walls. For I will hunt the deer in these lands around, he said, and let his hunting dogs run among the rough bushes, and ride upon the river and raise up the birds. Each man went by himself as he pleased. Princes rode out from the pavilions on their horses, and went without delay while the town was guarded, so that none of the enemy people might escape. Now Nero had come in Rome, and he had caused much suffering. He put the Pope to death and killed many people, Peter the chief apostle, and Paul also, Seneca and the senators, and harmed the whole city. His mother and his wife he caused to be killed, and troubled many Christians who believed in Christ. The Romans rose up at once when they saw this cruelty, to kill him alive because he had harmed them. They rushed to his palace, common people and others, to capture this wicked king if they could. The commons and the senators were all of one agreement. There was no other thing to be done but condemn him to death. Then the man fled, as it is strange to tell, through a secret back entrance, with all the people following. With only a wooden stick he went away. He took none of all the shining gold that he had possessed. On this stick with his teeth he gnawed and bit it, until it was sharp at the end, just like a spear. Then he waited a while and bitterly said these words aloud to all the people who were there. Turn back, traitors, never shall there arise again any cursed man who kills his own king. With this stick I myself will strike my heart. And he split it in two, and so the wicked man died. 6 months after this event, Vespasian went to war against the people of Judea, 4 miles outside Rome, truly speaking, and he who was emperor of all ended in sorrow. The great men gathered together and chose another named Galba, who had much anger against Lucas, a lord who had long hated him. And at last this lord brought him out of life. In the middle of the market of Rome they met together. There Otho struck him down in battle and gave him many wounds. He had held the crown for 4 months and more. And then that duke died and left the diamond behind. When Galba was gone and buried in the ground, then Otho entered and was made emperor. But he remained in his greatness only 3 months, and gave his soul to Saturn, for he killed himself.